Well, we could start from the beginning of time. I mean, that's always a fun place to start. Actually, no. So I had all I have to talk about is the weird ideas that I come up with throughout the week. Those little a little epiphany that pops in your head, and you're like, I'm going to run with that for a little bit. And it's seemingly random, but it just connects to everything else. I was listening to the Joe Rogan podcast with Lex Friedman, who's like an MIT, computational type guy. He's really into, artificial intelligence. He actually has a podcast, which used to be called Artificial Intelligence with Lex Friedman, but then he just changed it to his name. So I was listening to that, and he brought up this one guy, and he has like a theory of everything. His name is Stephan Wolfram. And I didn't really look into him too much. I literally watched maybe 10 minutes of his TED Talk of his theory of everything. So I don't know too much. And I know what Lex Friedman talked about. But it kind of popped a little idea in my head. And I'm really interested to see what your historical perspective of this whole idea is. The Zen Buddhist scripture type stuff, because it's I know it's one of those ideas that I knew I was trying to convey, but I couldn't. It's hard to put it into words. So sometimes you try to associate images, pictures, and stuff like that. But I was having a really hard time. But when I was hearing this guy's theory of everything, just a small snippet of what it might be, kind of made sense. And it really had a picture pop in my head. So I want to try to describe it. And it does tie back to our last conversation about we were talking about how people, when we come into these political ideas, or there's political unrest, and we need to figure out how to solve the problems of the world, and we're talking about emotion and how it pulls it in one direction, and one side of the sine wave, it's just unbalanced to one side, and then it takes something else to bring that back to the other direction and swing it like a pendulum, and you were touching on that. And when I was rewatching the video, I was like, I was kind of missing your point, but especially because it's something that I've described so many times that I'm like, I can't believe I didn't even bring it up. And I always talk about in terms of sound and waves and stuff like that. So, when there's an emotional response, you can think of it as like the wave. So you have the neutral line. Oh my God. He wants to be part of it too, man. He's really vibing on what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I'm assuming, is it a he, she?
It's a she. Yeah.
It's a she. Okay. She's vibing right now.
Yeah.
So you have the neutral line of the wave, the point, the 0 point, the point where there's nothing, right? And then you have the wave pattern that crosses that 0 point, that neutrality line. So it's like if you go too far in one direction over that neutral line, you're raising the amplitude. You're literally making it greater, right? So what'll happen to the wave is when it comes back down, crosses the neutral point and goes into the opposition, it has to go to that same absolute amount to the other side, right? So it has to pull it, because it's trying to keep it in balance. Everything's trying to keep itself in balance, right? Which creates the sine wave, which creates the totality, that overall frequency that is the whole system, right? Mm-hmm. So the system is trying to keep itself in balance with all its little, anything that happens along the way. It changes the sine wave, it decreases the amplitude, it increases the frequency, who knows, whatever it happens, right? Mm-hmm. So what you were kind of saying is and this is kind of what we want to do, is kind of take those extreme examples where that sine wave has a large amplitude and kind of bring it closer to neutrality, bring it to that calm, resting place where we're all good with the situation, where there's no civil unrest, because we've made the whole issue null. It literally, it's not an issue anymore. There's no reason to pull the system in one way or the other, because everything's worked out, right? So how you do that is not by keeping that balance, because if you keep that balance as the opposition, if you're like really tugging in the opposite direction because the whole system went in that direction further to the other side, you're perpetuating that system as it is. You're keeping that sine wave at the same frequency. But if you, like you said, kind of have a more calm and simple and an easy response, what you're doing is when the sine wave goes back into the opposition, it's now decreasing the amplitude, because then on the next wave around, it's gonna lessen and lessen and lessen until we reach neutrality, because we've solved the issues, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I had an image in my mind. Have you ever been in a swimming pool with like a bunch of guys, or could be anybody, but I've done it with my guy friends, where you just like, everyone walks in a circle for a really long time, and you get like this, this motion going, and then you stop, and then like the pool kind of keeps you going in that direction. Yeah. That's kind of like a flat version of this sine wave. If you're kind of like, instead of going with that motion, back down to the other opposite or whatever, if you kind of put your heels against it, which is kind of a bad analogy, because that's not exactly what you want to do. But then you start to slow, you're kind of standing against that wave instead of, letting it continue go. You're kind of slowing it down.
Yeah, you basically become that new variable that the whole system has to adjust to, because you're not following the same pattern. Right. All of a sudden there's a new pattern introduced and it has to adjust to it.
Sure.
I literally did that I don't know, it was probably like 3 weeks ago. We were in a pool with a couple of kids and they had never done that before. I'm like, this is like pool 101. This is like, come on, every kid needs to know how to do this, and they're having so much fun. But and then they get going and they're like, well, how do I stop? It's like, well, you just got to figure out, man.
or go with it.
Yeah, or go with it.
Try not to drown or whatever, but be careful.
Yeah, and I was surprised that I didn't catch it, because again, it's like, when I'm talking about my philosophy, a lot of it's built off of, it's the wave pattern, man. Everything's vibration, everything's a frequency. And so I like to literally think about systems as that, like every system, whether it's the world as a whole, the existence as a whole, people, things, positions, time, anything. It's like, I like to think about it like that. And so I really wanted to touch on that point, because it does feed into this like image, this other image that I had, that it follows the same principles, but it's a little different. And it made me like kind of reread parts of my book, because I do kind of describe it in there, but I was thinking of a better way to describe it. So let me see if I can recreate it. It's one of those things where you hope, I didn't write any of this down. I just hope that the idea is good enough that it like sticks in my brain. It's like, if it's good, it'll come around again. So he was describing how it's kind of like the theory of everything, where the universe existence basically only needs a couple of very simple rules to create complexity, to become what it is now.
Mm-hmm.
And they're very arbitrary, seemingly, like the rules that you're like, how did that rule get instigated? But when, and that's the one thing that Lex Friedman was having trouble kind of coming to. It's just like, there's these rules, but why are there the rules? So the basic rules are, depending on, I'm going to talk in my language, not their language. You have nodes of space, right? And I think I described this in my book, and I don't know if we have ever talked about it, but I imagine the universe is kind of like a computer, right? Mm-hmm. Pixels on a screen, except for in 3D space. So it's kind of like pixels in space. It's vertex points in every area of the three-dimensional space-time.
Mm-hmm.
So, imagine like and I call them nodes. So literally any volume of space or point in time or or any singleness that there is in the universe is a node. So, I could even take like parts of what are seemingly single things, like me in this wall. If I'm touching the wall, there's an interaction there, right? So if I chopped off my finger and part of the wall, and I focus on just my finger and part of the wall. My hand's on the outside and the rest of the wall is on the outside. That is a node because it's an interaction happening. It's two things coming together, interacting. So you can take any arbitrary volume of space, any arbitrary section of a timeline. Everything's a node. And size doesn't matter, space doesn't matter, all that doesn't matter. Everything's a node, right? So we're all just pixels, just groups of pixels that are also one pixel. And we interact with other pixels that are also one pixel, that are also groups of pixels. So that's the basics of it. So what he was saying is like, you take a node and it has a specific rule that in reference to whatever is around it, like whatever is next to it, whatever nodes are next to it, it follows a rule where it's like, if this node is on, that means the node next to it has to be off. Mm-hmm. So simple rule. He starts with a bunch of arbitrary rules that maybe this will work, maybe this won't. But I'm going with the one that I think would work. So imagine the rule that if you have two nodes, one has to be on and one has to be off. One has to be what I would call the one, and one has to be the zero, the something, the nothing, whatever opposites you want to attribute to it. But it's the one and the zero. So let's talk in computer language, 1 and 0. So 1 means on, 0 means off. Well, the thing is, it's not just that these two nodes next to each other are 1 and 0. It's that the 1 also is 0 and the 0 also is 1.
Sure.
You have to have both things present. Both things have to exist in the same node, in the same moment, in the same space for either to exist. You can't have 1 without 0. You can't have 0 without 1. You can't have something without nothing. You can't have nothing without something. If you have something, there's nothing outside of it. If you have nothing, then there has to be a something for nothing to even be relevant or not null. Again, it's the sine wave. For there to be either, it has to have a comparison to even exist. So we've already talked about this. That's the whole basis, but you need to kind of know that to get into this picture so 1 is 0, 0 is 1. But when we take a snapshot of it, if we want to make a rule, we say the one on the, right. It's right for me right now. I don't know if it's left for you, I guess. One on the right is 1 and then 0 is on the left, right? But I also know that this also contains a 0. This also contains the 1. You can kind of think about it like the 1 is kind of in the background. So it's the line within the circle, right? It's a line and the circle together, 1 and 0. So this is the picture I want you to kind of imagine. I want to make an animation of this at some point. But in 3-dimensional space, imagine you're looking at it like 2D right now, and you have the 1 and the 0. Now, imagine kind of like, softly laid over it, the 0 is a 1, and softly laid over the 1 is a 0. So you kind of picture that. Sure. Then you rotate it in 3D a little bit. So what's actually happening is there's a 1 behind the 0 and a 0 behind the 1, right? So now you got 4 things going on, and it's kind of just like a tic-tac-toe. It's just like 1, 0, 0, 1. It's like the ones next to each other are interacting in that way. And then this is where the principle comes in that 1 and 0 that are next to each other, not just the ones that are like overlaid, but they're next to each other, are also one system, because 0 needs 1 and 1 needs 0. So if you have 1 and 0 together, if I have a 0 over here and a 1 over here, them together is a third system. It's like that interaction is the third system. So you have the singleness, and then the interaction of the singleness becomes the third system. And then since there's a third system, it kind of like buds out. You can kind of picture it as like it's a something that if you zoom out, it becomes one thing. It's two things and it becomes one thing. So you zoom out and it becomes one thing. And then, but the thing is that other 0 and 1 that was next to it also becomes one thing, which become a 1 and 0, which then interact, which then become a whole new system. And then it keeps growing and growing and growing. But as it's growing, it's also becoming infinitely dense, because you keep zooming out, because it has to be one thing, but it's also two things. So it just keeps, you keep zooming out. That's the expansion of the universe. And that's also the infinite density of the universe, where we can keep looking deeper and deeper into it, into the cells, into the quarks, into the, all the subatomic particles. And we keep going deeper and we go, this must be base reality, right?
Mm-hmm.
For now, until we can go deeper and find those simpler and simpler principles, until you come upon that single first principle, which is the one is the zero is the one. You need either to exist. And then from there, when they're acting separately, they're acting as one system. So every time they separate, they also become a new one. So that's where it goes in and out, in and out, in and out. And so that's, if you think about it, in that case, we really are living in a simulation, and every single node of the universe is that interaction between the something and the nothing, going in and out of existence. But because of the matrix of those ones and zeros, when you're looking at it, if one means existence and zero means nothingness, and then there's a nothingness always next to the existence, then you get these crazy patterns going on that seem that they'll repeat themselves through time, right? But when you start getting smaller systems next to smaller systems, there needs to be a form of seeming chaos, because what happens is, if you think about it on a 2D screen where you have ones and zeros next to each other, right? Those ones and zeros are always going to be like either diagonal from another one, or the zeros are going to be diagonal from another zero, but they're never going to be like, up and down, left and right. They're never going to be next to each other. But when you start to get into 3D, what happens is you do have to start repeating those things. Like you're going to, imagine a zero surrounded by all ones, and then a zero next to that. There's got to be repetition somewhere. So then you're starting kind of that lopsided, not perfect pattern type thing. So, and then when you keep growing that out, it starts to get, fractaled. It starts to get crazier and crazier looking. And the basics of what this guy did is he went to a computer and he put in some of these simple rules. He's like, if I put, these 5 rules together, just black and white boxes, what do I get? And he kept getting these like fractaled pictures and whatnot. But then there was, every once in a while, there's this one rule that he would do that all of a sudden it would get lopsided. It would kind of grow into some weird complexity that wasn't a full pattern in itself, right?
Okay.
So that was what he was trying to prove, is like there's these very simple rules you can put on the universe and you can grow this infinite complexity out of it. And that's basically how the universe grew into what it is now. And it's kind of like, God, I always forget their names. So the Weinstein brothers, the brothers that always go on the Joe Rogan podcast, there's Eric, and then there is, what's the other one? I'll put his name down below, like I did last time. I'll put his name down below so that I can get the information out there. But he also had a theory of everything, and it was kind of the same. He went more with mathematics, which is computation. But again, this Stephen Wolfram was more visual, whereas the Weinstein brother was more computational, and just like literally going through the formulas. And there's something funny that he said. He said that the world is, he calls his theory of everything geometric unity. And he basically said the world is like the universe and all of existence is symmetrical. Like there is the black and the white, the one and the zero. It is like that. Mm-hmm. But when you do the calculations, you find that it actually prefers one side, is how he put it. He goes, there's the left and the right, and it prefers the left. And so when I saw this guy, like one of this guy's grid patterns, where it was like kind of like the first one that started showing some complexity, it was like, it ended up being in a triangle, kind of going from the vertex point and growing out. Like that's how all of the things happen. It's like the simplest part of the equation, and then it grows out and out and out and becomes more and more complex. And it's like this side, there's like a strip that was very like a very distinct pattern. It was just like black, white, black, white, black, white, black, white, all the way down the one side. But then as it grew kind of to the other side, that's where the complexity started growing from. It stayed pretty uniform down this side, but this side it started doing weird patterns and weird things. So it's this weird principle of the complexity grows as there's kind of like the pattern stays,
Sure.
And so, there's all these little principles you can get out of this of making the science and the computation of it, making it all make sense. And it's funny because I feel like people have been saying this forever and science is just catching up. It's
right.
like the way to describe it is really hard because again, when you're talking about the one is the zero and the zero is one, nothing is everything, everything is nothing. It's like that literally is a contradiction. That's a paradox. It doesn't make any sense. And then for you to take a snapshot where it's like, I take a moment of time and a one is here and a zero is there. But then you're telling me that, is there like a separate moment is there like a whole separate world where that moment of time is the opposite? And it's like, yeah. Okay, well, what is it like to be in that world? And it's like, well, it's technically the reverse of time. It's technically the negation of space. It's technically this, it's technically that. But really, it's just a mirror. It's the exact same thing, opposite, but you don't know it's opposite. You know what I'm saying? And that's, when you look in a mirror and you look at yourself, you're like, that is me, but I'm here. And my reflection is there. It's the complete opposite of me. I don't feel like I'm that person, but I am. That technically is the exact same world, but it's not. It's not real. I am real. And it's like you get in that distinction because of your perspective, but really it's like there's your other universe right there, just acting exactly the same. So anyway, I'm getting off on a lot of tangents, and I want you to hear you because again, it's like these are things that I'm like discovering, and I'm hearing little tidbits from people, and I'm coming to these ideas. And again, I'm just kind of recultivating ideas that I came through meditation and psychedelics and all that, right? And I have I've hardly read about any of this stuff. I just started, when I met you, I just started getting into the books that teach these very principles in a different language, right? So it's like where are some places that this stuff comes from that has things that I'm not seeing? Like what? I'm just going to let you go freely. Just move freely through that thought process because I know that we've talked about this a billion times, but it's also like there's something new there.
Well, I don't think, for the most part, these questions are kind of answered through Zen. I don't really think that they talk about this much. I mean, I've asked some people before, and there's no. The answer is that doesn't necessarily matter. I mean, it matters because we're interested in it. We're talking about it. What does that mean? But because like you could ask the question, why did the pattern start at all? Why did one happen or whatever, however you want to put that, which is a general question, basically like why anything? There's no real answer for that. No one will give you an answer. It's just because it is. So that's that, I suppose, as for Zen. But I mean, my cat's just going crazy, knocking stuff over.
That was literally the apex of your Zen practice right there. Like,
what?
Yeah, like I saw it kind of happening and I wanted to just like yell, but I'm like, there's probably a lag. I'm probably not even going to get there. Time slowed down and everything. And you just literally reached back with nothing and just grabbed it. That was
I just know the noises. I knew she likes to pull it down, hang on it. But I mean, is there like some facet of that? Because like I get what you mean about like the whole theory of that structure, but what kind of what part of it is the most? Where's the question in that?
The question for me is that it's the exact question you just raised. Like nobody has gotten to that. Like, why does the thing start at all? Like there's a pattern, there's a rule, And that's what I was saying. Like, I feel like Lex Friedman was like, when he was stating that he wasn't, it's the thing that I'm always saying, that all these guys that we talk about, Krishnamurti, Bohm, Buckminster Fuller, Wei Wu Wei, they're always showing us the pattern through the contradiction, through the language of like this and that, this or that, this, not that. And it's all true. They're showing us the pattern, and it's just like science is now showing us the pattern. Computation is now showing us the pattern. But there's that question. Why? Like, why, how, where's the start? Why does the start even exist? And that, I feel like I have answered, but I can't answer. You know what I'm saying? Like, I can't. Yeah. And I'm going to try to give it the best go around. And I kind of already said this, but it happened because it has to happen. There is no other reason. There's no way that it couldn't have happened. Because again, imagine it not happening means there is no existence, which is non-existence. There's just nothing, right? But you can't just have nothing.
Well, why not? I mean, if before the physical universe, you're God in some place that's neither is or is not, you're beyond that, why do you have to start it? You could easily just be in, I don't know, God's zone, whatever that is. Why start it?
Let me describe a couple of principles, scientific principles, and see if I can help build it off of there. So the Big Bang, it wasn't an explosion into space. It wasn't like you just said, like, why can't you be God in the nothing with the nothing around and there's just nothing, right?
Yeah.
God is the something, right?
Yeah.
So you can't have, non-existence means non-existence. God wouldn't exist. There would be nothing, right? So the Big Bang actually wasn't an explosion of a single moment, a single point in time, a single thing that, smaller than the head of a pin, which isn't even, again, that people are trying to give you some kind of significant way you can visualize this, but that's not even true. And then it explodes into everything. There's nothing to explode into. There's literally nothing. Like, you can't explode into nothing. If there's nothing, there's nothing.
Right.
It's kind of like, even space is something. Like, even the space, there is unless it's a vacuum, like a black hole sucking the something into nothing, that's as close to nothing as you're going to get as a black hole. But as far as like space, there's something there. There's a medium you can move through, right? There's something. So what the Big Bang was an explosion of space into space as space. So the way I think about it, and it's easier to think about if you start kind of like down the timeline when something already exists. You have an infinite amount of vertices, an infinite amount of like single vertex points, these nodes of 3D space-time, these pixels, if you will, of 3D space-time. And space is kind of growing out of them. Imagine like the opposite of a black hole, where it's like if you were to like try to pinpoint where the source is, you'll never reach it. But things are coming from it. It's that cone. In 3D it would be a cone, 2D it would be a triangle. The single point, and then going into the complexity. Yeah. Every single vertice is just growing that. It's just pulling information out from a vertex point and then expanding it into complexity. And then it's intermingling with the rest of the complexity from every other vertex point. So as the universe is expanding, again, it's like this information is seemingly coming out of nowhere, but it's growing like a flower. It's growing from a seed into this complex thing. And every single pixel is doing that.
Right.
And so, there's the other questions that are set aside, like what if a black hole is sucking information in and just re-looping it back into the existence as the universe expands? Possible, probably, likely, but we don't know. You can't really test that yet, right?
Yeah.
So it's like there's no loss of information. It literally is just recycling it into new things, right? taking it from some complex thing and then putting it back into the simplest form of existence and then spitting it back out, letting it interact, become complex again, and then just cycling over and over again. Don't know that, but it's likely, right? So when you think about it that way, there is literally something coming from nothing, but it's also something that it's coming from, but it's also nothing that it's coming from. See what I'm saying? Like when we think of the point at the beginning of time, that thing of like, where did the pattern start?
Right.
Well, where the pattern started was the whole of the pattern. So you have the ending, the end complexity feeding back into the simplest complexity. There is no actual ending. And that's the thing that linearly we can't wrap our heads around, right? And so all I'm saying is it had to happen because you can't just have nothing. And again, I don't have words. The best I can say is that to have nothing as a concept, just as like for nothing to exist, for non-existence to exist, again, paradox. You have to have something because something has to be the comparison that makes it not null. Again, something and nothing is a system. It's a waveform. You can't have one without the other, or else it collapses the wave into neutrality, which makes it null, which makes it not even which makes it not exist, right? And then you can even say, well, what about that null? What about that point where neither exists because there is no system? And I'm saying that non-existence cannot exist without existence. So it's just this infinite loop of something and nothing looping back around, oscillating to the point where it gets going back and forth so much that it's just one thing, and that's everything. And that's as close as I can give you, man.
I hear you. Like I'm imagining, because it is hard to put this into words, but I still I think I can feel why you're saying something had to be, but still, I just I'm trying to wrap my head around that, but I cannot. Like there's still something in me that's going, but why? But why did it do that? Or in another way, if this is one, this situation right here is, I'm 1 and you're 0 or whatever, and we're both, and that's happening. And you were saying like the mirror, like that's a different reality, but it's the same. And well, why not instead of why did anything start, but why is my consciousness experiencing this side of the mirror, if you will, instead of, why am I in this part of the universe as opposed to, all the other multiple things that are happening right here at once, the one of me right now. You know what I mean?
You just asked the one question I asked myself about 2 weeks ago that I still have not answered.
See, there's so, it's a super hard one. Why? And I still think, there's something in me that wants to say that it is possible for there have to been a period when nothing was, but it still doesn't make sense. Like there's something that wants to say that, but you can't even imagine what that would be. And I don't know, man, it's tough. I'm not satisfied with the verbal conclusion. There's something in me that feels like,
I can, again, I can give you a reasoning, but I'm not even fully on board with my reasoning. Right. Because I asked the same question. It's like, okay, it's literally right after I came up with kind of like that visual of the ones and the zeros in it. But why Rick? Like, why? Yeah. How come I am me perceiving this all through this one vertex point? Why am I not the cell? Why am I not? Why am I not Bodhi? Why am I not the cat? Why am I not? My cat's going off in the background too. Why am I not any of these things? And it's like, here's my reasoning, but again, it doesn't satisfy it. Because it all boils down to faith, man. It's like, again, I have these answers that in my brain, they seem absolutely reasonable. Right. But I can't, it's outside of language to the point where I can't portray it to somebody else. So you just got to take faith. I have to take faith that I even know what I'm talking about because I can't even talk about it. And you have to take faith that I kind of know what I'm saying, but I just can't show you, And so here's the faith is that, again, there has to be something, there has to be nothing. There has to be, for me to exist as something, I have to have something outside of myself.
Sure. Something
to move into. It's like the Big Bang. And the Big Bang didn't move into anything because there's nothing outside of it. The Big Bang moved amongst itself, I am actually moving within something. There's something outside of me, which is my nothing. I am my something. Outside of me is my nothing. That is my non-existence. That is my feeling of emptiness. I cannot feel you right now. I can't, you're not like an appendage of me. I can't feel like what it is to be you. I can't feel like what it is to be this table, or I can't feel like what it is to be that light, that the photon shooting from that lamp behind me. I can't feel those things, right? That is my non-existence. That is my perspective. That's my comparison to know I am me, right? Now, why Rick though? Why Rick? I have to have faith that I am as the all, because everything that has ever existed is inside of me, this vertex point. So I am me funneling the totality of the universe through me and then out into complexity. The totality of the universe is in me and I am also within it. That is the paradox of it cycling through, right? So I have to have faith and believe that I am actually living as you right now. I am living as this table. I do have all of these perspectives, right? I just can't feel them because in this linear timeline, I am feeling the Rick node. I am feeling that right now, my perspective. And so I'm on this linear timeline. I'm riding this ride. I am riding all the other rides at the same time, but the Rick node doesn't feel that. You don't feel me, right? And I feel as though I'm controlling this, and we've gotten to this before, is free will. And, how does this Rick consciousness come into this one body and have free will and is learning and is speaking and is picking his words and all that stuff? It's all just flowing through. We feel like we have free will, but we actually don't. It's already the aspects of ourselves are predetermining what's going to happen next, like what next step is going to take. And we feel that. So free will, we do feel that happening. Anyway, to not get off on that tangent, to finish this up, and we can get off on that tangent if you want. But again, it's like that's the faith I have to take, that I am experiencing you. I am experiencing everything else. But for some reason, right now on this linear timeline, as I'm speaking to you, this node is Rick is that's all I can feel, man. And again, doesn't satisfy your urge, doesn't satisfy that craving you have to go. But why Rick? Why Bodhi?
Right.
But the reasoning to me makes sense. But also it's like, I can still have that space of unknowing of, but how is it that I am experiencing Rick right now? Just Rick. Like, that's crazy. Right. I am separate from everything else. Like, that's insane. And again, to me, it does boil down to faith. And I don't know. Maybe we can, man. I don't know if we can ever get to that question. I don't know if it's even.
That's interesting.
I feel like it's not possible. I feel like I've reasoned it to the point where I can teach myself that it's not possible.
Well, okay. If I could maybe put in a little bit of the Zen here, and let me say this is I'm not really trained by anybody. So most of, what I know about Zen is just my interpretation of what I've read and things like that. So I could be completely wrong, but,
it should go with saying that it's the exact same situation with me, except I think, again, it's like our interest of the subject propels our self-learning rather than teaching right. from any one specific node of space-time.
Sure. Tell me that last thing you said, because it was like key to why I started talking about this.
I don't know if we could ever come to knowing why it is that we are. feeling this consciousness is this one person inside of this.
Or, and like put it another way, like, if you can experience the consciousness of something else. So you were saying, everything outside of me that's my nothingness to me, and I'm something. But I think, if you put it simply, I think in sort of, I'll keep it to like haiku poetry instead of Zen. But if you are the one, and your environment is, your emptiness or whatever. So the way to answer that question, to come to that understanding, would be, if you could, at least theoretically for the moment, nullify yourself as a one. When I say for the moment, these are all words. But if you could do that somehow, if you could nullify your own one, then everything which is your nothingness to you, sort of, that's the nothingness, I think, of Zen meditation, of transcending the opposites or the dichotomy of anything. So at least some people are saying that you can come to find that answer by becoming, that emptiness that you cannot experience, to melt down and, are you getting this image?
So as you're talking, I really was, this is what I was picturing. Me as the one surrounded by a bunch of zeros. Just imagine a 2D picture with me as the one surrounded by a bunch of zeros.
Right.
And then imagine my one turns to a zero, but the zero next to me turns to a one. I am now something separate, right?
Uh-huh.
But what that brings to mind is something spatially from my vertex point. So I'm the one, right? And we're talking about me turning off and something else turning on, right? Or even just all zeros.
Yeah. See, I think what you're maybe coming from, or at least what the other guy was saying, is that, if there's a one and a zero, then they're going to like switch. That one has to be off. But I'm saying that maybe they can all be off. It could be a sea of zeros for a moment.
Yep. And I would say that does exist.
Yeah. Okay.
It does. It already happens.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to have that perspective, because I'm the one. And for me to have that perspective, it is going to happen. Right.
Right.
And it already does happen. Like there's, they say we're made of atoms, and the atoms are 99% empty space. So we're 99% empty space, but we see what the part of the space that's not empty, right? We're perceiving that. It's kind of like if you zoom out, you get enough of a density of things that they can't, there's enough ones intermingling in that space that it can't move through the empty space of ones that's denser than itself, but we can move through the gas, the air that's mostly a bunch of zeros, and every once in a while has a one through it. We can move through that, kind of push the ones out of the way, right? So, and the other thing I was thinking about, and I don't know if this is going to lead to an answer to your question, other than that, I was thinking about, like, I'm the one and there's a bunch of zeros around me. But that's not even really true. I'm interacting with things around me, which it is a part of you. It's like when you have thoughts, when somebody speaks to you, the vibration comes into your ear, it wiggles the little mechanics of your ear, and then it becomes a stimulus in your brain that becomes a thought and becomes a part of you, right? It's the same thing with everything, the feeling on your skin, the things you're seeing, the world around you, it imprints you, right? So it's almost like you can think of it as like, well, if it's imprinting me and if it's necessary to me, then those zeros are actually ones because it's part of me. It literally is an appendage expanding out. Now, the intensity of how it feels like appendage is whatever's closest to me, obviously. I'm a nodal point, and if I think of a 360 view, there's like a 360 view of like, maybe not ones, but like halves, It's like I'm interacting, they're interacting me. And then as you move out into that, expand into that sea, it does become zeros, things that are seemingly not interacting. But then we got the universe, we got the sun emitting photons, and you got this, and then, you get into astrology of like how the planets and the gravity interact and how everything affects you. Maybe not that much, maybe to such a minute degree that you're like, I can't even prove to you that these things outside of that spatial radius are interacting, but they are. It's the whole system's interacting as one, which is interacting with things next to it, which is interacting with things next to it, which eventually reaches you in some way, shape, or form, right? So it really is like the whole thing is a bunch of ones.
Right. Well, that's the thing I think about any node. I think in the one and the zero thing, it's anything is going to be zero if I'm the one, but that doesn't mean in itself it's a zero. It's a one to something else. And so it's really a matter of where you're standing at the moment, or what way you're looking at it. So zeros and ones spreading across the sea of space-time, and we're expanding out into everything, but also, like I said before, we are also nothing. Right.
We're also that zero in the sea of zeros. So, and again, for me, it's like that happens. It already is happening. It's always happening, but you're not able to perceive it. So because the singleness of everything has to be there, the singleness of nothing also has to be there. But again, those are a system. So there's a point where they do meet and they cannot be separate from each other, which I feel, to me, in my language, that is the totality of everything. It's where the zero becomes the one becomes the zero. But at one, right, that infinite vertex point that you can never reach.
Okay. There. This is a good way to put it, because we have talked about this before in the ones and the zeros. And I always put it like, is there a third value somewhere in between? And so maybe enlightenment or coming to the impossible vertice or whatever is not dissolving from a one and becoming a sea of zeros, but somehow seeing or witnessing like the reality that there is neither the one or the zero. It's just a matter of how it's being seen at that moment, which includes yourself.
Yeah.
So then it would nullify everything, and you would neither be, you wouldn't be choosing myself or not myself. Technically, I suppose you, the one, could never have the experience of discovering that a zero and a one are indistinguishable. You could never have that as the one. But I think it can become two. And I think that's where we've not met. We've not met that point yet.
Like I said, you could walk up to it, you can look at it, you can go, it's there. And then as soon as you dip your toe in, as soon as you put your hand into it, your fingers, they just disappear.
Right.
You're just like, but I know it's there, man. I know it. I want to taste it. I want to be it. And then when you go into it, you're not in it. You're actually just not in it.
Yeah. And this is hard too, because, whether I'm correct about, the theories of Zen or whatever, I still don't know if it's possible. They say it's possible for other people. I have not experienced what that might mean. I mean, I'm sorry, my cat. It technically, the one can enter into it, but I think it can occur. It's not that something is being entered into, but because, all right, so you ask, so there's someone who says, I've had this enlightenment experience. Then they tell you that you as a one could never actually experience that. And you're talking to them as a one, and you're trying to, how does that make sense? And right now, as they're talking to me, they're a one. And they're telling me as a one and them as one, nobody as a one could ever experience that thing. There's no one to experience it in that thing, but it's possible. Now that's like that's a paradox that I can't figure out myself because I've actually not been there. But I think if you were there, it would be a matter of how, it'd be even more difficult to put into words, which is why you have these explanations like this, I think, after the fact from somebody else.
So there is something there, though. This is how I think about it, and this is where I've asked you before, like Buddha or any other being that's been enlightened, how do they speak of it, right? That because you say you can get there. That's the phrase you're using. You can get there, right?
That's what they say. Yeah.
This is how I see them getting there, right? Well, let's talk about the word enlighten. Enlighten, like too light, right? Basically like too. I don't know the exact like definition of it, but how I think of enlighten to me is like to shed light on. Actually, I think that's the root of it. To shed light on. And when you're shedding light on something, you're exposing it. You're making, it's like the sun. We wouldn't exist without light. Light is what makes us, it shows us. It helps us perceive things. Like the fact that the sun or any light source is bouncing light off of our skin and into this camera, transferring that energy and then shining it back into your eyeballs right now. That's how you can see me, is because of light. If everything goes dark, we can't see each other. There's no perspective of each other, right? So when I think of enlighten, to me, what that means is to reach the full extent of the light, to shed light on literally everything. Like you become the all. You see, not only see everything, you feel everything. You are everything. You feel eternal. You feel everlasting, omnipotent, right? So to me, that's the one expanding into everything around it, right? I have a limited view as a limited being right now because of my perception. I can expand my perception so that it becomes everything. And so to me, that's what enlighten means, right? So, but then when you become everything, you're starting to become the infinity, right? You're starting to get close to that point where everything becomes nothing, that vertex point, right? You're expanding into infinity. You keep going and going, but you're right there. Again, I'm looking at it. I see it. It's right there. All I need to do is get that extra, whatever that oomph is, whatever that thing is that helps me get there. And you're saying people get there. They're in that realm of the zero and the one, the nothingness and everythingness, where that meets, right? How I see it. And again, this is one thing that I feel as my faith is what happens, is that exact thing. There's different levels. I'm at a certain level as I am perceiving reality right now. I can perceive more reality. I could perceive more than that. I could perceive more than that. I can perceive more than that. And I keep going until infinity. I could even get to the point of perceiving everything, of infinity. I am still not perceiving nothing at that point. I am there. I'm butted up against it. It's literally, it's almost like it's touching my skin. It's what's on the other side of my skin, right? And that's the point I feel like people can get to. And to be enlightened is to see everything. But again, that nothing is an integral part of it. You technically are, by principle, perceiving the nothing as well, because you aren't perceiving the things that you're not. So inherently, you're already doing that right now. The perspective of
you
the
are
Rick,
sorry, you are just like textbook. It's just so good what you're saying right now. Go on, continue.
Like
I'm textbook too, but you go on.
Like for Rick, for the Rick, the Bodhi, like we're limited in the fact that I have faith that I am still perceiving it all right now as we're talking. But in linear space-time, there's this choice that I have, this free will for me to not be. I am not the Rick right now. I see a wall. I see a Bodhi on a computer screen. I see a cat. I see everything around me, right? I am choosing not to feel that all right now, even though I am. Again, it's, to me, the word I use is recognition. It's happening. It's actually happening. The actuality of it is I am feeling the all right now. I'm just choosing not to recognize it at this very moment. And that recognition is very hard to come by. And most people don't. And you have to have a strong strong free will to want to do that. And you can choose not to do it your whole life. But the part about it is you are a system and there's things within you that are choosing to perceive the level of reality that you're living right now. Your eyes have chosen to evolve to this certain aspect of reality where I can see the color spectrum that is your face and my environment. My ears have the integral parts of it have chosen to evolve to the point to get to there. I, as a person, as the totality of all of those parts, can choose to push that limitation further if I want. And I actually, as the culmination of everything that I am, within everything that existence is, I can choose to perceive the all. And here's where it actually gets hard, from where I think it actually gets, I feel like that perceiving the all and butting up against the nothingness, I feel like that's actually really easy when you're on this path. You can actually get there, and you're gonna get in incremental steps, right? You're gonna feel a little bit more, you're gonna feel a little bit more, you're gonna feel a little bit more, and all of a sudden you're at the all, right? Mm-hmm. Where I don't think it's really easy is to, on that path, like we've talked about this before, you're on that linear path, and I levitated along the way. I had some telepathic type things. Synchronicities all over the place. But it's those things just happen as you're on that path, right? Where I think it's really, really hard is to stop at any one of those levels and intentionally remain there. You know what I'm saying? Like for me to feel the everything, I have to feel the table. I have to be my cat. I have to be you. I have to be other people, right? And that technically is happening along that way to the feeling the totality. What's really hard is staying feeling you. How can I remain feeling Bodhi? How can I remain like astral projecting over a specific town for an extended period of time? To me, getting to that enlightened aspect is a little bit easier. I don't know if it is for everybody. And again, you do follow those steps along the way.
It's not.
Yeah, you do follow those steps along the way. But again, it's the things that just randomly happen to you. But for you to stay levitating, I feel like that is like, man, you're most likely not even going to do that.
I think it's impossible.
Yeah.
For one thing. Let me put it like, there's so many little things in here. For one, I think we're talking about, you're expanding towards, everything. This is like the golden mean. It's like, there's a straight line and there's the corkscrew of movement, but it never can touch the line. The lines never intersect no matter how close they get.
It's like the universe, like the sun in the middle with all of us rotating around it, and it's actually moving at the same time in a certain pattern. Yeah.
But here's the other thing. When we defined enlightenment in the way that you did, so Buddha was like one of the only prophets to kind of advocate or define enlightenment or spiritual liberation in opposite terms as, light and expansion and all those kinds of ideas. We've probably talked about this before, but do you know what nirvana means? Which is enlightenment, or a word for that state. Have you heard of this? No?
If we've talked about it, and if you give me the definition, I do not remember. So go ahead.
It literally means to blow out a light. Nirvana. Ooh. So when you're talking about enlightenment being like filling with light and expanding, really to Buddha's point of view, it's just blowing out that light. And this comes back to something that I know we brought up, talking about, the sort of expanding and never reaching, the totality, is that in science so far, anytime we've looked for the hottest heat to measure, they've always found something that was more hot eventually. And that always goes, and you can never reach an unsurpassable heat. There's just something that we've found so far that's always been hotter somewhere in the universe. But at 0 degrees, when matter stops moving at the freezing point, that is absolute zero according to science, because, time on, atomic scale stops for, when something's frozen. So you can definitely, so we were talking about, never reaching that thing. And as far as you can get is like pressing up against that nothingness. But if you could, instead of expanding or being a one, maintaining a one, if you could, I don't know, somehow dissolve and drop down to absolute zero or empty or whatever, it would be like jumping over that gap that is impossible to be reached through the expansion. At least that is how, for instance, like Wei Wu Wei would put the whole situation. And then the other guy that we've talked about who's friends with him, Benoit, he would put it like that. And so then this goes back to the book and everything else kind of connected to this. And you keep saying the word faith, and it's all good, whatever it is. But so there's just at least. So this book I'm reading is talking about Zen specifically, but he's referring to sort of words or concepts that could be related to any religion. And so, do you know who William James is?
No.
I think he was like a Quaker or some sort of old American Christian type of religious guy, but he was a writer. He wrote a lot of stuff. And so in some book that he wrote, he was talking about a once-born Christian or any kind of religious person, or a twice-born person. Have you ever heard those terms before?
I could assume what they are, but no.
Yeah. I mean, I guess, born again Christian or whatever, that's somewhat falls into that. But it's a little bit more like psychological than just that kind of, so a once born religious person is someone, and I know this isn't totally true because I know your personal story, but for the most part, you could say a once born Christian is someone who accepts life or is generally okay with life. You have faith and, things will work out, and you have that kind of spin on life. That's usually a once born person. And a twice born person in any religion is someone who is, going through all sorts of hell and trials and traumas and whatever. And they eventually have to, it's like the sinner who becomes the saint. That's a twice born. And so the way he's relating all of this is, even within Zen, there's sort of, if you want to be general about it, the point of view that you've always taken and the point of view that I've always taken, if you want to take it really generally, these are like the two different schools. And you are definitely on that one side, and I'm definitely on this side. And you're more of the once born, and I'm more of the twice born, even though you have been twice born. I read your stuff, we've talked, you've been through things that made you think, that made you get to this positive, the faith-based side or whatever. But still, the emphases of those two schools are we definitely take the typical point of view on those things. It's super interesting. And so the general point of view of the once born is that everything, because you said it exactly. You can choose to have the awareness that even though you're also all those other things. And that's why a once borner, they usually feel okay, like it's all good, even though I as this might be this way, it's all good, baby. And that's generally speaking like the stance that Dogen took. And so he was a part of like Soto, which is, you could say, the once born. And their whole thing is just like, you're already enlightened. So just be quiet, chill out on your cushion and just like, let it come. If it comes, it comes. If it doesn't, it doesn't. It's all good anyway. Whereas the Twiceborners go, I can hear you. I can hear somebody say like, this is all God or Buddha or whatever you want to call it. And you're definitely not ultimately separated. And the suffering is just momentary or in time and that blah, blah, blah. You can tell that to the second born. And I can get on that, but I don't know it. I don't know it like I know that this table, whatever is solid. So I want to know it. And that's like the key characteristic. And like, I think Krishnamurti's view is more toward this. I think there's a quote of Krishnamurti one time. He said, meditation is the explosion of thought or something. Or no, meditation is thought smashing itself against its own nothingness. Poof. So the Twiceborn, they want to smash through. They want to know it. And you're saying maybe you can't know. You can only get as close as like, up against the wall and that kind of thing. But at least for this, this school of thought, there's a way to get in there. That's at least their school. Yeah.
There's something you said in there that you started converting me for a second back to a Twiceborn. And I do think there's something to be said about, choosing your paths in the moment. Cause I definitely, I can see myself being both of those things at different periods of time in my life. Right. Mm-hmm. And I think you can actually go back and forth.
Yeah.
But here's something. It was back to something you said like way before that. I like both like the two ideas you brought up. And here's the thing. When you were talking about the heat and getting too hot and you can't get too hot, but the cold, you could. I was thinking about it on the fact of how I was thinking about enlightenment, where you're expanding into everything, right? And that kind of, to me, that's kind of like a way forward. Something I am where I am now, and I'm moving into something more than myself, right? Mm-hmm. But then there's the opposite direction, the hot and the cold, where, that's the heat, is you're becoming everything. There's a lot of friction there. There's a lot of things happening, a lot of information mixing around in one giant thing. That's the ultimate heat. You can just keep going and going and going. Yeah. What I can also do is I can go the opposite direction and stop time. Instead of going to the future, I can stay present, right? Right. And when I mean stay present, I mean stay present to the point where the future, like the time just stops moving towards the future, right?
Sure.
And there's another way to get up against that. That's becoming nothing. And I wrote this in my book, and it's one of the principles that I had a really hard time describing. So I don't think I even did it that well in my book, but it's the whole thing where if you were to take a slice of time and stop time, right? Take a moment and you perceive that moment. You think, when I say, okay, imagine this moment right now, everything just stops. You'd think that I would just stop. It'd be kind of like a 2D picture. Everything that you see is as it is, right? And then if you think about so that's the visual. If you think about the auditory, whatever pitch of frequency, whatever noise is going into your ears, it would stop there. And that pitch would just be that pitch. It stays that pitch. However hot you feel right now or whatever temperature you feel, it would stay that temperature, right? Everything freezes. Like every aspect, every variable freezes as it is, right? But, and this kind of goes back to the whole comparison thing. What also freezes is your mentality. The reason I can even perceive colors is because they're separated in separate instances, right? So if I'm looking at that 2D picture, that visual aspect of the slice of time, my brain literally can't say, there's the outline of Bodhi's head, there's the wall, I can't say there's the, because there's no time for me to think all those things. There's no time for my brain to process the things and separate them, right? That's what we're doing. We're taking in this stimulus, we're separating through it, we're wading through it, and we're picking out little aspects that form a picture.
Sure.
My brain's not doing that. So what happens is there becomes the nothing. Like everything becomes one thing, which to me is nothing, right? And it's the same thing with the auditory, like the sounds coming in. You think all I would hear is that one frequency, that boop, right? But you're not just hearing that one frequency because you're not perceiving it separate from all other frequencies because you're not perceiving.
Exactly.
So again, it collapses into the nothingness. So that's basically what going back into the present is like, I'm stopping time. I'm taking a slice of time and I'm staying within that. And I'm not moving. There's no movement. There's just absolute stillness, right? And so for a second, I thought, not going into the totality, not building up the heat. I go into the cold. I freeze things. I stop it, right? Maybe that's where I can go into the nothingness. But actually, you're still moving through time. You come out of that meditation. You come out of that frozen amount of time. You're 2 hours into the future, man. You're just like that. You're still, your body is still linearly doing. The Buddha came back to say where he had been.
Right.
And so both of those things are actually happening. You are stuck in time.
Yeah.
You are still moving through time at the same time, simultaneously. So again, to me, I could say that you have reached that. I could say that you haven't reached that. And I could also say what I said before, which is you got so close that you butted up right against it.
Right.
That you felt it, but you weren't actually it. I feel like that's the distinction I'm trying to get at. Is like, again, I can see it. I can feel it. I know it's there. I can try to come back and express it and integrate it. It's a real thing. And when I say faith, I'm saying like, I wasn't actually it. And for me, it's kind of like Descartes. It's like, what can I actually know?
Right.
And then when you start peeling away those layers of what can I actually know? Well, I see this wall. Yeah, but the wall could just be some figment of my imagination, a culmination of different firings in my brain. I could just be a brain in the vat. You can go through all the philosophical principles. The one thing I do know is that I am. Because there's something that is perceiving what I'm trying to know, what I think I can know, right? So for me, it's like when I say faith, it's like I was never actually it. I don't think I can be it. For me to be it means there's an aspect of myself that isn't feeling it. So I literally cannot feel it. So that I go, but I was there, man. I was there, like, and I want to tell you that there's in there, and you can get to that same position that I was, but I could never truly go. I was even my DMT experience where I lost the self, quote unquote. I came back into a self that talks about that story, Yeah,
exactly.
For me to tell you, to describe what losing yourself is like, I literally can't even do it, man. It's like, I have to give you some point of perspective on it. And that's something that, again, I can talk to you about it, but you really just have to go there. Like and that's where you're talking about that what'd you call it? Second born. It's like
twice born.
You do, man. You have to get there. You have to be twice born. I feel like you almost have to be twice born to be first born, just because that's the path I took.
Yeah.
But I feel like there are people that are firstborn and they never went twice born. And I'm like, you're still missing something, man. Like, I can feel that you get it and you're saying the same things as me, but there's an aspect of life that you didn't go through that you're missing, where you go, man, you have to go through hell to get to heaven, or else heaven isn't going to taste as sweet, And that's,
that is usually how those two schools they point at the other and say, you're fundamentally missing something here about the other. But actually, I mean, the author of this book was standing back and saying that just the fact that there are two different sort of emphasis on Zen, and that both are saying you each are lacking something, those two together make a system again. And so like, so they were talking about the sort of the twice born, they're the ones that use like the koan, those kind of paradoxical phrases or whatever, those insoluble statements. And so he was just saying, it's interesting because there's like the koan school and then there's just sitting school. And, they're saying that they're each wrong, but really together they make another koan or another paradox or whatever.
That's all of life, man. That's literally how all of life is like, right. we look back on it and say there's two things that are making one system, but really the one system made the two things, which made the one system, which made the two things, which made the one system, which made the two things into infinity. And at some point it loops back into itself where you're like, the two things were the one system the whole time,
Right. And I mean, I think like masters on each side who've gotten there through whatever route their school teaches, I think for one thing, they're just there for different types of people. That's why they came into being. It's like, there's going to be that person who's like, super confused about what living is and all that. And there's a sort of temperament for that type.
Yeah.
And so like, neither one is better or right or wrong or whatever. It's just the way I'm looking at it is that these two different teaching styles are just for, if you feel good and everything like that, and if you're good with faith and you just want to sit and like, you're going to go towards that. And that's the end of that for you. I still think that whatever side you're on, you're going to get to the same area, which kind of shows again that they can't be separated.
No. And, speaking to my very personal experience, I was straddling that line, and that's where I felt like I got there, where I went through hell. I had all these bad experiences. I started having good experiences. It started pulling me towards the wanting to be better and know and expand and become enlightened, right? So, I was in that same position, like just I want to be there, I need to get there, right? But there was a point where, you're like, did I get there? Was that it? Did 5-MeO-DMT take me there? What did I learn? It doesn't feel like it's solidified. It feels like I was there, but it didn't stick with me, And then there became, it's hard to describe the evolution of it. And it's one of the reasons I do kind of want to like write a memoir just to kind of like reimagine how the story went,
Right.
I just know there was a point, skipping ahead. I don't remember the iterations. It's kind of like because it wasn't like, like an epiphany, like a something that just interjected itself, it was like iterations that went along. You kind of forget because it's like, it's not something obvious.
Right.
It's something that evolved. But eventually I came to the point where literally straight up asking the universe, what is the meaning of life?
Yeah.
Like I've tried to reason it, and I feel like I'm getting there, but there's something missing. Like I can't get there. Like it's just I'm hitting a roadblock every time. Something a feeling I'm missing. Not even just the mathematics, not even just I need a feeling to drive me further, right? And so I just started meditating with the intention of what is the meaning of life? How does it all work? Why does it all work? Why are we here? Asking these questions,
Right.
And never really receiving any answers because again, I have this intention, I have this goal. It's almost like the universe is like, what's with these goals, man? Like, why do you have this goal? Yeah. Like, why do you even care? Like, why are you even asking me this? The fact that you're asking me it is why I'm not telling you, It's kind of like, it's, and I also even attributed it to it's kind of like aliens. It's just like, come down, please take us away. It's like the fact that you want me there right now is why I'm not there. You guys got to handle your own stuff. You got to figure it out. Like we can't just come in and save the day or else you're not going to learn anything,
Right.
And it's like, so at some point I stopped having the intention of asking the question, though, because I asked that question so much, it became kind of a part of me. It's like, I obviously have this search. This is obviously a focus of my life, but
right.
I haven't gotten the answers, man. It's like, I haven't gotten there. Nothing's evolving. I'm just going to continue living my life. And it's going to be a program playing in the background, just waiting until, I become frustrated again. I'm like, but what is the meaning of it all? But because I set that aside and kind of just stopped caring about, not presently searching for it, the answer came. I meditated. I got to that point of stillness where it seems like time just stopped. Yeah. And then all of a sudden, what brought me back to reality was these sayings and these phrases that when I came back, it's like I'm meditating and I come back and I'm like, it's like a dream where somebody says something and you're like, what did that mean? What is that word? Is that even a word? Is that a real thing? I came back and I'm like, these phrases, and that when I repeat in my book, existence is the superposed oscillation of equal opposing force. I don't even know what the hell that meant. I came out of the meditation like, there's a sentence and I remember it distinctly. I don't know what it means. Let me work it out. Let me work backwards. I got this kernel. Let me work backwards. Does this even make like literary sense? Do these words make sense together? So I got there, and that's kind of like, again, I got there, I butted up against it. Something kind of jumped to me. I got in it, and it's all because at some point I kind of stopped caring, which is funny because it's the exact same situation of how I met my wife. I went through hell. I went through a bunch of different girlfriends, very short, crappy relationships where it was not healthy for either of us on multiple occasions. At one point, and I'm getting drunk, I'm getting high, I'm looking for love and I'm not finding it. And that just makes me want to drink more. And it's just this crappy cycle. Right. And then at some point I was like, you know what, this isn't healthy. This isn't good. I need to be able to be myself. Like I need to just be able to move on and just like live life how I am right now. I don't need somebody else to put my problems on, I don't need that. Yeah. And so I kind of just gave up. I was like, I'm to the point where I don't even care about finding a significant other anymore. I'm done looking for it. I kind of don't even want it. It's just like, I need to figure my own life out. Right. Yeah. Literally like a week later, that's when I started hanging out with what is now my wife. It's like, again, that release of like, there's something I want so bad. I'm looking for it. I'm reasoning it, blah, 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 blah. And then eventually you just come to the point where you do just kind of like, it's not giving up, but it's like, I'm just going to set this, like, whatever. Yeah. Like if I figure it out, I figure it out. If I don't, I don't. Set aside. And that's when the thing came. So again, to me, that is straddling that line between firstborn and secondborn. It's like, you've gone through hell, you reach that point, and the wanting it so much is actually what's keeping you from getting it. And that very second that you release that and become the firstborn, where you go, whatever happens, happens, and it's all good, man. That's when it actually happens and you become the secondborn. So again, feel like they are the same thing.
Right. I think though, so in both Zen cases, whether you are holding on to a question, the reason why you do that is to use something to focus on so that all your other questions sort of get out of the way. And so you come face to face with this question and you get, you concentrate very hard day and night until it becomes like subconscious or whatever. But the concentration is, getting everything out of the way so that you can finally, stop asking the question and sort of pass through it or whatever. So you have to let go in that situation. But there's like a technique first that helped you to get that, that tension and release. Whereas the other ones just say like, it's all good and just let go right from the get-go. And they might be people who have a calmer mindset already. and can just set it down and be that way. And some people need to like sort of break the habits of their thinking to get that close first. But in either case, I mean, you're letting go to get past that one final point. And yeah, I think, you know, the key words is like, you know, you're racking your brain about it. And the moment you stopped consciously asking it, then an answer came. So it's like the actual question or the observation is sort of the division that you can't get beyond. So it's really the not looking. So they're the same. They're the same. Yeah, it's just a matter of how you get there.
Somebody once said, I heard this in, I wish I remember who it was, but they're talking about meditation, and they're talking about how a lot of people in meditation, they try to calm their mind. Like they're actively like trying to bat away all of the thoughts that are coming in and saying, okay, I have this thought. You know, some people go, okay, I have this thought. All right, now let it go. I have this thought. Okay, now let it go. Like just immediately let it go. And there was one guy that said, no, like what he does is whatever thought comes into his mind, he doesn't actively try to let it go. He lets it play out. There's something that is weighing on my mind that I haven't worked through yet. And I can't get to that place of calm until I work that out. So I have to intellectually and mentally work it out. And yeah, maybe there's another thought next to it. Maybe there's another thought that comes up after that I have to mentally work out. And he goes, it might take 2 weeks. It might take a month. It might take a year for me to work through all those things. And then I finally get to that place of, that one time I sit down and no thoughts came to the mind.
Yeah.
You worked them all through. You got them all through. There's nothing weighing on your being anymore. There's nothing weighing on your mind. Now you just automatically get that place of calm, you know, which I've tried both and I've gotten some pretty good results with both. One kind of feels better than the other. You know what I'm saying? Like one feels like I did the work. I put in the work and I got the candy, you know, I got the carrot at the end of the stick.
Yeah.
And then some are just like, well, why wouldn't you take the shortcut? You know, it's kind of like psychedelics. Well, why wouldn't you take the shortcut? And it's like, I think it was actually Nareem Karoly Baba that said like, psychedelics, you know, you can get there with psychedelics, but you can't stay there.
Yeah.
Whereas with meditation, you can stay there, you know?
Sure.
You're forcibly removed with psychedelics. Whereas with meditation, man, you can show up at the door whenever you want, you know, and you can stay as long as you want. You can do whatever you want. But with,
Well, I think to be in a space where you can come and go wherever you want, to be that advanced at meditation, you'd still have to go through some of these other things. I mean, I mean, most people, no one's like, that's like a lifelong, like, you know, practice of, but this brings up something. I heard someone recently talking about, you can imagine that meditation is like, it was some like keyword, some phrase that he used that I never heard before. So it's probably wrong, but it was like, the fabled inbox zero, when you don't have any emails left to check, to open up, to throw away or whatever. So like meditation is bringing all of those unread messages up from the subconscious, like whatever it was, like that thing that happened to me when I was 5 years old, like let it come up and play out until you get to inbox zero, you know, and then you can, I think that's where that level is. So you have to sort of deal with those issues to get into a, you know, wider, lighter space. But so this reminds me of Krishnamurti would always ask, but do you have to spend all of your time going through each of those letters that may take months or years to solve just that one email? Do you have to really go through all of that? Or can you take one problem and look at it and really analyze like how problems, you know, why it is a problem for me or why I have problems, and finish that and then jump all the way to this spot where you can come and go whenever you please. That's what Krishnamurti always says. And I'm so frustrated with him because he's like, just do it. just do it already. It's like, I would love to do it, man. I just have not thoroughly figured out why it is I have these problems, or, you know, why the brain makes new problems or holds on to things that happened. I wish it could not do that. Believe me, Christian Murdy, I want to jump there with you. But so, yeah, again, I'm coming back to it, but well, let's leave it at that. Do you think you have to go through them all, or can you see one problem and know all problems?
I think you can do either. It just depends on what comes. What's the path of least resistance for you as a nodal point within space-time?
Yeah,
I think there's a million, because of complexity. There's a million different directions back to the singularity. There's literally every direction back to the singularity.
Yeah, all points lead there.
You have to find where you grew from and what's your path of least resistance, which is how you got from the singularity in the first place. You know? Sure. And that's going to be different for literally everybody. Some people are going to go through every combination, and that it was actually their path of least resistance was to go through every combination. Some people just like, they don't even know it yet, but they have a direct line. And it takes one thing to trigger that and go, oh, yeah, duh, it's there. You know, and it's like, that's not fair. It's not something you can teach. Yeah. And that's one thing, man. I have done absolutely no no marketing of my book at all.
Oh, of your book?
Because I wrote that book for me. All I did was describe my path, describe the way I got there. But again, it's going to be different for everybody. So that's why, like, right in the book, I even say, like, don't listen to me. You know, it's just, don't listen to anybody, man. You have to listen to people to figure out what some paths are, to start trying, do trial and error.
Or that there are paths.
Or that there are paths, so that you get a little bit of hope to move down the path, you know. Yeah. So you need to listen to people. But again, it's like, don't take everything I'm saying as the path. It's not. Yeah. It could be. I'm not saying it can't be. Right. But most likely the probability is that it's not. Yeah. And there's a greater probability that some things that I'm saying could be part of your path. Then there's a lesser probability, I should say. There's a lesser probability that some parts are your path or whatever. So, you know, again, it's just like it's very rare that my path is going to perfectly align with yours. Right. It's very common that you might take one little piece of it. Yeah. And then, you know, there's all different spectrums in between, man. So it's like, here you go. If somehow you come upon this in your lifetime, if somebody mentions this to you, you read it, and then there's some part of you that wants to tell somebody else about it, and then they read it and they get something. Sure. I would be very happy if my book kind of reached people organically like that. So again, I wrote it for me. I put it out in the universe because why not? It's there. People can read it, take what you want from it. But philosophically, I cannot feel good about myself if I was to be like, everybody should read this because it could help your life. It's like, I can't do that. I can't bring myself to that point.
That's interesting. Because I mean, I think this whole thing rather goes to show that they're all saying the same thing, you know, and further goes to show like the infighting. Like, for instance, this book is about the two different schools of Zen or whatever. Instead of bickering about it, if we would just realize like, there's just that kind of person. There's going to be endlessly new types of people, and we got to keep it fresh for everyone. And it's all good. That's interesting in itself. I feel like a lot of theological discussions don't go to that point. These pretty much say the same thing.
To really point to that, you do have to realize that everything is the same. That 1 and 0, the black box and the white box interacting next to each other and becoming that third perspective is everything. And once you realize that there's that archetype, that tendril that extends itself from singularity to everything, all of complexity, then you go, what I am saying is literally the same as what you're saying. We're just blinded by our limitations right now and our separateness. And that's why we think that it isn't, but it actually is. So how do we find where it is? Like, how do we clear away all of this, like, this brush and see that we're in the same field, you know? How do we do that? That's what most people don't do.
Yes. I mean, so like we're doing that right now. And so are you asking like, how would we further do that? Or are you saying, how does the average person come to this question of the field?
It was kind of a rhetorical question. It's saying you ask yourself that in every instance. Like, okay, my ideology is seemingly opposite from yours. Mm-hmm. But if I have this principle that I know that all of complexity grew from a singularity, they have to be the same. They just have to. And we're not seeing it right now. So how is it the same? How do we come to clear that brush to see that we're in the same field? That's what we should always be asking ourselves.
I mean, yes, we should, but we don't. I mean, because I think most people would say that these paths lead to different fields. I mean, that's like the fundamental issue with why you wouldn't. I mean, yeah, you could say like these things have to be fundamentally connected, so they have to have some common ground. I'm going to figure out what it is. I mean, most people aren't going to do that.
Yeah, aren't we in the same country? Are we on the same landmass? Are we in the same world? Aren't we in the same universe? Are we in the same existence? Are we in the same singularity? Didn't we grow from the same singularity?
We have more in common than we don't.
Yeah, we literally have everything in common. So it's one of those things that it's almost like you have to follow that line of thought to get to the fact that that base code, that base reality, that base rule of existence, to then bring it back out to how it is now and go and have that as like a regular occurring thought. That's how I find it's like, okay, I have some inkling, some weird propensity or ambition to figure that out. I want to know what the meaning of life is. I want to find that archetype. I clear away the brush. I get to the field. I realize we're all in the same field. Then I go back. The brush goes back over. The brush starts filling back in. And so whenever somebody else is over there on the other side of the brush yelling at me because they're like, "No, man, like the brush is on fire," and I'm like, "What are you talking about? Over here, it's perfectly fine. It's not on fire." And then you go, we must be in different fields, man. But then you clear away the brush and you go, "Oh no, your field was just on fire from your perspective. From mine, I was perfectly fine." But for me to go to just know that, to me to go, guys, we got to clear away the brush. You almost had to do that first. You had to at some point do that. And then to know it's possible to get back there and do it again.
This kind of goes back to Daryl Davis, man. Third week in a row, we're bringing his name up. But like, just going, not just standing at the seeming difference and being like, "Oh, that's different." But deliberately going into the mind of the races as the races to find out like what that is for them, as opposed to, "Oh, well, this is what he believes. We're clearly different. We're clearly in different fields or whatever." You kind of have to have like this pause before any or every reaction, every habitual thought you have where you make a conclusion. If you go, "Wait a minute," but that I think that is even harder to get people to have than bringing people to the realization that we're all in the same field. Just getting people to have that pause and like the curiosity to find out, or like the faith that everything is connected and blah blah blah. Like that's the harder thing to get people to realize. If they had that, I think we would all be very quickly realizing that we're on the same field. Well,
it's also the one guy that's like he's like, I'm like, "Oh, you just got to clear away your brush, man." And then we'll be talking about the same thing. And he's like, "What are you talking about? You're stupid. My brush, I can't clear away my brush. It's on freaking fire. I can't even touch it. Like, you come over here from where I'm standing and then see my point of view." And you're like, "I literally can't get to your point of view unless I go through this brush that's on fire." So it's really hard, man. It's really hard. But the thing is, if I start clearing my brush from the other side, the fire's got nowhere to go. It's got nowhere to go. It's going to burn itself out. Eventually, I'm going to be able to help show my perspective to that person. you got to build that bridge. You got to catalyze that understanding from the different perspectives. Because if you're not willing to do that, if you're just going to be yelling from your point of, oh God, I don't want to use the word privilege, of your point of like your stance where the thing is not happening to me. Or if you're going to yell from the point of where it is happening to me and you need to pay attention because that's all that matters. It's like, the brush is between us, man.
Right.
And the only way for me to see your perspective or you to see my perspective is if we take care of the brush between us. And if we're not taking care of it, we're just yelling from afar. You're putting the onus on me and I'm putting the onus on you to take care of it. And two people working on one problem is way easier than one person working on everybody's problems, man. It's not going to work out. But
only if they know how to work together.
Yeah. And that's that we're losing it, man. We're losing it.
I know. So, I mean, I think that's why all the religions are there to sort of remind us that there's at least, you know, what you could say it's all bullshit or whatever, but, you know, there's at least this sort of hope of coming together, you know.
Unity. The goal. And again, the goal just needs to be revitalized. It needs to be updated. It needs to evolve. It needs to have a different language to it, which we're doing here. We need to see all the inherent archetypal aspects of all religions and update the language to modern times so that we can all revisit the idea that there is unity. There's one goal. There's one thing. There's a reason that humans come together and solve these issues. And that is a greater want than separating, you know?
Yeah.
And that's not, what's the new religion? Scientology, man? Like, really? There's already too much craziness and it's not even that old. Like, you know,
I mean, it hardly counts as a religion to me because they're not really trying to bring anything together. It's like, you're a frozen spirit on a planet somewhere or what? It's like, what is that all about? And then with actual science, their downfall is the fact that they say, hey, all religion is stupid. Because this is what's really happening. Look at our tests. This is what's really happening. It's like, man, don't you know that the tests that if you look at the act as if your tests are a story, that it's reflecting the same principles that the other stories are reflecting. Right. So apples to oranges, no, but don't apples and oranges both grow from the ground, man? You know, like, so that's where science falls. And so again, it's all ideologies. They all do that. If you realize that you have to realize that they're all telling the same story. And if you realize that, it's easier to come together and figure these things out and become unified. And right now we just don't have an upgraded language that is obvious enough. Yeah. I do think that that is necessary. It would be really hard to do, man. I mean, people do try to update these types of things. Scientology or whatever they had to, you know, invent to update it. But then it's up to the inventor of those ideas, or those words or whatever. So you have to, I don't know, because they either got to be 100% right on all their points to like sort of translate these old ideas into a new language. They have to be totally consistent on what those things mean, you know? So, who's going to take up that job though? Who's doing that?
We are, man. We're here.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. Here we are.
All right. Well, I think that's a good way to wrap it up.
Yeah, man.
We're here.
Sure. Yeah.
We're going to do it.
Yeah.
We'll continue that next week.
Okay. Cool.
All right. Well, have a great weekend. And
you as well, man.
Good luck. Godspeed.